Hi everyone, it's Rachael back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to do another round of recent horror reads. This time I'm focusing on horror books that are more backlist titles, so they didn't come out this year. I have a good variety as always, so let's get started. First, I read a book called The Toymaker by Sergio Gomez, and that is the same author who wrote Camp Slaughter, which was one of my favorite books, and it's just such a scary read that I wanted to go back and check out some of his own backlist titles, and this one just sounded great. It's about an older man who was a toy maker all of his life, and when his friend dies, he decides to basically make himself a new friend, so he builds himself a doll, and that doll possibly comes to life. The story is also told from multiple perspectives, so we also get a young boy that is going to live in the same town with his father and stepmother, and the story goes from there. This is very much one of those classic stories about a group of kids that are fighting a monster, and it follows those tropes in a really enjoyable way. I liked the fact that the doll maker creates this doll, and if you know me, you know that I love stories that involve creepy dolls, and so I love those aspects to it. Another reviewer described this book as Goosebumps for adults, and I can't take credit for that comparison, but man, is it a good one. I definitely got Goosebump vibes from this. The doll very much reminded me of Slappy, and I just think that anyone who, again, enjoys Goosebumps as a child and is looking for that adult version should definitely check out this one. If I had one complaint, it's a very minor one and quite personal, and that's the fact that this book is over 500 pages, and I personally found the middle section to be a bit long. I would have liked to see it edited down, but keep in mind that I'm someone who really prefers shorter horror. I've always said that, and so that might not be an issue for someone else who enjoys longer horror books. Otherwise, I always appreciate that Sergio Gomez writes Mexican and Hispanic characters into his story, which is his own background, and I really like to see that diversity in his work and bringing in his own voice. So I love the inclusion of Mexican food and just some really good details that definitely added to the story. Overall, a really fun one and one I would definitely recommend. Now, speaking of Goosebumps, I also read Night of the Living Dummy by R.L. Stine. This was actually my first time reading a Goosebumps book. I've mentioned before that I have watched the TV show. I watched one episode about Slappy and it terrified me as a kid. And so when I decided to pick up the series, I wanted to check out the book that was about Slappy himself. This is about two twin girls that find a dummy in a dumpster. And one of the girls decides to become a ventriloquist and starts to make money entertaining people with this doll. Her sister becomes jealous and also gets a dummy, and a lot of the story is about the back and forth and their jealousy and competing with each other with these dummies. And then of course it takes a turn for the creepy when the dolls are maybe doing things for themselves. As I just mentioned, I really enjoy doll stories, so I was excited for this one. And my complaint about this was just the fact that I'm not someone who reads a lot of children's and middle grade books, and this one just felt really young to me. I got very much annoyed with the jealousy between the two sisters, and it just kind of took over the story for me. But I realized that I'm well beyond the age category for these books, so I went into it knowing that it might not be my cup of tea, and it wasn't. So if you're someone who read Goosebumps as a kid, you'll probably get a lot more nostalgia revisiting them as adults. If you've never read Goosebumps before, and you're an adult like me, I might recommend skipping them just because I don't think you're going to get the experience that people who again read them as children really got. I am considering reading some Fear Street though, because I understand that while they're still aimed at younger kids, they're aimed at older younger kids, so I'm hopeful that those might work a little bit better for me. I want to read at least one Fear Street book just so I can say that I have read them. So I would love your recommendations if you have a favorite in the collection, which one I should try to check out. As well, I read Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, and I had never watched the movie, so I went into this one quite blind. All I knew was the general synopsis, that it's about a couple that move into a fancy apartment building. They have hopes of starting a family, and quite soon she does become pregnant, but they are visited by some very odd neighbors in the apartment building, and things get very strange. So I definitely recommend, if you're like me and have the ability to go into this one quite blind, do so. It was really fun to get to see the twists and turns for the first time, and I really didn't know where it was going, and it was so much fun. I've said before that I'm not a huge classics reader, whether it's horror or otherwise. I just find that the writing can be very stilted, but this one I found very easy to get into. It is quite short, which definitely helped with that. And the writing again was just easy to follow, very straightforward, and I thought it was actually decently creepy. I would love to reread this book if I ever become pregnant again. It would probably be the most terrifying horror book to read during a pregnancy, but so much of this book definitely talks about cravings and the different things that happen to your body during pregnancy. And there's a question of, are these things normal or is something worse going on? I definitely think this book will particularly connect with female readers, especially those who have at least gone through a pregnancy, because I think that this book hit home a lot more than it would have if I had read it prior to having a child. But regardless, it's so much fun. Definitely one of my new favorite horror classics, and I just really enjoyed it. The ending is bizarre. I was also surprised to see how crazy this book gets, because I kind of go into classics with a bit of a bias and thinking that they can't really be that creepy because they're old books, which I know sounds silly. But yeah, this book is intense and it definitely holds up to modern reading. Yes, there are definitely some dated things in it. It's very much of its time and does have some racial language that I would not want to see in a modern book. But in terms of creepiness, it holds up. It was good. I definitely recommend that one. Finally, I want to talk about an anthology, and that is Hex Life, which is edited by Christopher Golden and Rachael Autumn Deering. This is a collection of stories that are all themed around witches and are written by an all-female cast of authors, which I love. I received this in a Nightworms package, and I gotta say that this cover is absolutely gorgeous. I was so excited to receive it, and of course, even more excited to finally get to read it. This collection of short stories didn't totally work for me though, but I want to preface that by saying that a lot of my complaints about this book are more so with my personal taste in reading. And that's the fact that while this is a collection of stories about witches, this is more urban fantasy and not horror, as one typically finds with witch stories. And I'm just not a big urban fantasy reader. There's nothing wrong with them. I just don't tend to enjoy those stories very much. The first story in the collection really worked for me. That was written by Kate Howard, and I definitely want to check out more of her books. I know she's written 2 books, Roses and Rot and An Unkindness of Magicians. Let me know which one I should check out, because even though those are both, I believe, urban fantasy, I could see them working for me because the story was fantastic. It was spooky and haunting, and it just delved enough into the horror side of witches that I wanted from the rest of the collection. And after that story, I was just let down because I read story after story. And again, there was nothing wrong with those stories, but they were just urban fantasy and I didn't connect with them. The cast of authors is great. There are so many good names in here, everyone from Anya Alborn to Jennifer McMahon. And I just had miss after miss after miss. I honestly really didn't find much more I enjoyed in this collection. But again, that comes from the fact that I was looking for horror stories about witches and I got urban fantasy about witches. I also should mention that several of the stories in this book are tied to different urban fantasy worlds, like Kelley Armstrong's Otherworld series. So if you are someone that is in love with any of those series, you'll probably really like to see another story from those authors. But they didn't mean as much to me because I wasn't overly familiar with the stories and the characters that they were talking about. So this was kind of a miss for me, which is so disappointing because I absolutely love the book itself in terms of a physical object. But again, the best thing that came out of this collection was me finding out how much I like Kat Howard's writing, and hopefully I will go and check out more of her work and enjoy that as well. So that's my thoughts on Hex Life. So that is it for this video. I would love to hear your comments down below if you plan on picking up any of the books I mentioned, and also share with me what is your favorite horror classic, because Rosemary's Baby is definitely on my short list. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.